been so inspiring to hear everybody speak before me. So it's just as much of a pleasure to listen as to give this presentation and share more about the work that we do in Pakistan. So as you can see, the first picture is from one of our recent activities that was held earlier this year, before the pandemic and when the world was a little different. I am, as an introduction, Nameerah Hameed. I'm a founder and chair of Women in Energy Professional Network in Pakistan. So just as a brief overview of what we do, we have a reach of around 5,000 female professionals and engineers working in the energy sector in Pakistan. We have a presence across all provinces of Pakistan and also all the major cities. 1/3 of our membership is in leadership positions. And that's really important for us. And I mention it here because that's what we aim to do. We want to double the number of female leaders in the energy sector in Pakistan in the next 5 years, and that's what we're working towards. We were formed officially in March 2018. Initially, our activities were very, low-hanging fruits, easy things, networking lunches or workshops, connecting mentors, senior and younger women. And in the next year, sort of our second year, we became ambitious. We were growing in numbers. We had more women within our professional network volunteering their time in addition to their full-time jobs, because this is something that we really wanted to work on. So I'm going to share some of our ambitious projects that we worked on in renewable energy in the later slides. Since the beginning, it was also very important for us to have partnerships. And this is important because sometimes, and this is true in South Asia as well as in the sort of Europe and the US, most women networks are very informal. So in South Asia, there's a tendency to have WhatsApp groups. So, get all the women together in a WhatsApp group and, we're there for each other. But I mean, that's great. That's how it all starts. But we wanted to do something more than that. We wanted to have a network which was worthy of being listened to, which was pushing for policy change, which was pushing for an instrumental, shift in the way that the sector works in Pakistan. So our first partnership was with the government in Punjab, the largest province in Pakistan. And this sort of gave us the institutional support from the get-go. Some of our other partnerships are also with the World Bank. They have a South Asia Women in Power regional network. So this sort of gives us access to a South Asia-wide women networks who are working in a similar field to learn, what works in India, what works in Bangladesh, what works in Nepal, and what are some of the things that might be useful for us in Pakistan. And also, we are in partnership with the Global Women's Network in the Energy Transition. I know Christine was moderating the previous session, and that's also been very useful for us to learn what works in Europe, for example. Our 5 pillars of the stream of work where we, have our activities, if we had to, summarize it, we do work first in STEM education, because that's where the real change needs to start. So we have our chapter in local universities in Pakistan, so that more women at student levels can start to join and learn more about what are some of the careers and job opportunities that they will have in the sector. Our second pillar is recruitment. So we need to have more women in the sector. And that's a very important place to begin the work as well. Then the third is development. Because once you get women in the sector, every year more are dropping out. And we have a pyramid that we see all across the world. Every next level of career progression, there are fewer and fewer women. And what are the reasons? There are so many reports and studies out there. For the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of donor agencies and development partners are churning out the same reports, and the reasons are also the same. It's just that we need to work on them harder. The fourth pillar is retention. So once you're developing, their careers, you're putting in more training, you're putting in more mentorship and networking for them, then you're also trying to retain them and their talent within the sector. And then the last and probably my most favorite pillar is policy. So it's good to work on all of these 4 pillars, but it's really the structural sort of policy changes that you need in the sector to bring real change. So one of our absolute favorite activities, and I'll only show you a couple of them, 2 or 3 of them. One of our favorite ones is female solar training. This idea was initially suggested and produced by one of our favorite female engineers in Pakistan by the name of Rehana Aziz. She designed the first sort of training. So we partnered with her and a local solar company by the name of Shams Power to provide solar training for female engineers. Again, these were, some of them were students, some of them were recent graduates, some of them were young professionals already working, but all of them had the same story, that no matter at which stage that they were at, they were given fewer opportunities in the sector in comparison to their male counterparts. So as an additional sort of skill set that they could have is a certification from, you know, our organization in partnership with a solar company that led them through 4 days of hands-on training of how to do solar PV installation. It was, again, as I said, it was 4 days of hands-on training. 2 days were classroom-based learning, and then 2 days were on site. And this is sort of one of my favorite pictures, which sort of, you know, shows our graduates working on solar PV. How do we measure success when we're doing these trainings? So one of our key sort of, you know, what sort of makes us happy about our work is that the CEO of the sponsor companies took special note to recruit more female engineers in his company. And that then sort of became into a bigger success in that the company realized that they didn't have an inclusive gender policy in their company. And they reached out to us to work with them on producing industry standards for what an inclusive HR policy for a company, a solar company in Pakistan could look like. And we're working with them on making not just this company implement this policy, but also making a blueprint and industry standard for other companies in Pakistan to adopt similar inclusive, especially gender-related inclusive policies in their companies. The success is also measured that 1/3 of our trainees were offered jobs within 1 month of graduating. We wish it was, you know, all the trainees, but 1/3 is also a really good success measure in that this skill helps women be recruited more and be retained more in the sector. Our second sort of favorite, you know, sort of activity that we're doing is also taking the conversation of women inclusion outside of echo chambers. So all of us on this webinar agree with each other that we need more women and we need the energy sector to be more inclusive. But what about all the others who are not a part of this conversation right now? And that's what we're working on. We want to take this conversation to public places. So for example, last year, one of the conferences that WWEA in Pakistan hosted in September 2019, we were able to host a dedicated Women in Energy panel. And the women on the panel, as you see, they are managing director of a Punjab Power Development Board. They are CEOs of local companies. They are leaders in their organizations. And you also see a male on the panel because we need male champions to champion on our behalf. So the whole sort of he for she movement or having male champions is absolute key. Another thing which is very important is creating partnerships. So I already mentioned our partnership with the World Bank, but this is all to sort of to reinforce the idea that it's only through partnerships that you're able to think bigger and be more ambitious in what you can offer. Just to add more, and I did this very quickly, is that well, after I was listening to Janine and a few of the others, is that it's very interesting how climate movements across the world are heavily female-led, and sort of it's a lot. You would see more women working in climate activism at local levels than men. And so one of the examples in Pakistan is also the Climate Action Now network. They're both males and females, but A lot of the work that they're doing on protests on the roads and holding marches and really holding the government accountable on climate action. And for example, on, as you see in the picture, on smog and air quality, it's women, young women that you see leading that conversation. And that's been very interesting for us as well. The last thing that I want to add is our most ambitious activity so far is actually going to be held tomorrow. I'm so glad that the WWEA is a part of it. And I mention this only because this is so relevant to get women in the renewable energy and clean tech and climate sector. What happened, this quick story for this activity, as I wrap up, is that over the summer in June, especially, a lot of students graduate from universities. They move back to Pakistan, or they're graduating from local universities, and COVID pandemic, had hit, and there was a lot of confusion, a lot of worry. What is going to happen to their career progression? Are there even any job opportunities out there? And they were asking us to connect them to employers. And when we spoke to employers, especially solar companies in Pakistan, they would say, oh, we're still recruiting. So clearly there was just so much chaos and confusion in the market, and we wanted to do something about it. So we partnered up with amazing women-led communities, women engineers, women in tech, WePower, and with all sort of combined together, all of us are hosting the largest digital job fair in Pakistan, scheduled for tomorrow, Friday and Saturday. And the idea is honestly to get more women in the sector. It's open to both males and females, but our sort of not so hidden agenda is to get women to avail this job fair and enter, be able to access job opportunities that some of these companies would have. So we have 1,300 plus candidates registered already. We have 60 plus companies exhibiting with us. We have more than 9 and 10 panel sessions dedicated on specific topics. One is actually renewable energy. What are some of the opportunities available in Pakistan, and what are some of the critical skills that young graduates require? And one other panel, which is very relevant to this conversation today, is also, Pakistan's clean energy transition. How do we prepare our workforce towards growing green? We're listening from the High Commissioner of Canada to Pakistan for this. We're listening to people working as climate change advisors, locally as well as internationally. And we really hope that, any effort that we're putting towards this leads to more women inclusion in the sector, because that's the least that we can do in sharing the privilege that some of us have had in the positions that we are in. So I will end with that and give the stage back to Stefan.
Thanks so much, Nameerah. I think this is a very impressive and a great example of how you are building a community succeed, and then hopefully also achieve the change that we urgently need.